Most are afraid of unknown depths, skirting shores thinking world flat. And with the island girls in celebration of new religion. Nobody led me or said this way. I sailed alone on makeshift raft with wind as companion. Fate for deliverance, confidence enough to assess new disposition. Seekers of lost paradise may seem fools to those who never sought the other world. Welcome to Momentary Zen with Zen Garcia. Visit www.fallenangels.tv. You're listening to Revolution Radio.
Hello, shalom, and welcome everyone to another show here on the Zen Garcia channel. We're happy to report that Zen continues to recover at home and is doing really well. So hopefully he will be back here on the channel hosting shows, and we really look forward to that. This is Lisa George, your host. I'm joined here by my husband, Noble George, and Brett Lee Thomas today. Brett will be continuing to talk about his book that he's released, The Rise of Mystery Babylon, The Way of Cain, Part 2, where we left off last month. So we look forward to hearing from Brett. Brett, are you there, brother?
I am here. Thank you, Lisa, for that nice intro. Appreciate it. How are you? How are you both? How's Noble? Noble there, right?
Yep, I'm still here. She hasn't divorced me yet.
You haven't left yet. Okay.
No. She was about to, though.
No, we're hanging in there. Brett, would you be okay to open us up in prayer before we start this live stream?
Sure.
Okay. Thank you, brother.
Mm-hmm. Heavenly Father, thank you that you brought us all together once again tonight, and thank you that your works are guiding our talk and our conversation here. And please help it to be fruitful so we can reach others to be serving you. Please bless us all tonight to have a nice, enjoyable conversation and help us in our daily lives as we leave here tonight too. In Jesus' name, amen.
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 Thank you so much, Brett.
You're welcome.
Yes.
You're welcome.
So we're hanging out here today. It is about 2:00 in the afternoon here in Hawaii. We went to the beach and jumped in the water a little earlier so we could do some grounding. Is it pretty hot where you're at too, Brett?
Yes, it is, and very humid. So you're making me jealous.
Oh, sorry.
I would love to jump in the beach right now. It's what a dream.
Yeah.
In the water.
No, yes, it's been a while though. I mean, when you live in a place where the beach is so accessible, we should be there every day, but we usually try to get there at least once a week. I would love to be there every day too, but it's
grounding.
just good. Grounding is
that's great.
It's like 10 minutes from our house. It's not like it's even far or in traffic or anything, but I'm just grateful for the days that we're able to have time to get over there and do some swimming and relax, and hopefully eventually I'll be surfing again. My ribs are recovering. So yeah, but we're hanging in there. We have several projects going on. I'm really excited though. You sent me your new book. I've been reading through the first 3 chapters. I think I got through so far. And really excited about it, Brett. And I know we'll hopefully go into that in the next show or two, but I wanted to pick up where we left off last time. You were going over these really amazing points in your book, The Way of Cain. But first, would you like to give out your contact information, how people can buy your books, anything that you want to share?
Sure, yeah. My email, if anybody has questions or thoughts or comments, is Mystery Babylon. It's the name of the books, but all one word, at 1791.com. That's the name of the email address. So if you like that, my website is mysterybabylon.com, pretty simple. And it has some basic information about what's in the books, at least the first couple. After I get this new volume done, I'll be able to go back and do a little bit of updating. But that's where I'm at right now. My books are on Zen's website. If you'd like to check out the first 2, the third one, I'm going to have to get that going too, because we just got it done as of last month. So I'm going to have to just play catch up on all the rest of these things that we all need to do with those when we get those books out.
Yeah, it is. It feels kind of pressure, even though I think when I get ready to publish a book, it's all self-pressure where I'm like, okay, I have to get this thing done when really, it's all in Yah's timing, right? I mean, I'm
Right.
sure you feel the crunch too, but it's kind of like it'll be released and be all good at the very time that he wants it to be released.
I think you're absolutely correct, Lisa, because it's so what I've learned over these years is just God has his time, not your time. Sometimes I try to hurry up and I find out something happens, or I don't have the vision or whatever. I just can't. And then it gets pushed off. So I just find it better just to trust in him and let it go day by day. And if I do get it one day, great. If I, and if I can do extra that day, great. If I can't do it the next couple of days, it is what it is. And I know it's his timing. It's just
Yeah.
fascinating how that works, right? You two experience that same thing?
Yes, for sure. How about you, hun?
Do I?
Have you experienced that where you feel like you got to get pressured to do your lesson or something, but
What are you
then
talking about? It's my life. My life is just under pressure all the time.
no, but a lot of it is self-inflicted, is what we're saying.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, well, yeah. I mean, gosh, I'm just a bozo. I don't learn after the first 2 times, and
Oh,
I
come
keep
on.
doing the same mistake. So, yeah. So well.
That's kind of, yeah, it's almost like we're sheep, in a nice way. The shepherd is just kind of directing us to go to the right way, and we kind of keep wanting to go backwards. And it's like, no,
Mhm.
back this way. Right?
Yeah, I'm one of the dumb sheep.
Oh, come on.
Well, we're looking forward to hearing from you, Brett. I think maybe you could give a little short overview of these points that you were going over last time, and then we can pick it up in point number 9 that you're discussing.
Yeah, sure. In the end of The Way of Cain, which is my first volume, what I did was a lot of it was history, and I think I've mentioned before that Jesus himself said, "As it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the coming of the sons of man," paraphrasing. And so what I did was I looked up as much and as many things about the past that could be and possibly interpreted as going on right now in this day and age. So a lot of The Way of Cain is a cultural look at a lot of these things in not only biblical accounts, but a lot of additional texts that are out there, like I'm sure both Lisa and Noble know a lot about those different texts out there, Book of Enoch, etc. A lot of those texts that I've also researched just to kind of put a picture to the whole story of mainly Genesis, because that's where the parallels start. So if we get the whole story, we begin to see what's going on today, and we begin to wonder if these are indeed the end times because of that. So The Way of Cain, the first volume, is more of a cultural look and as far as how we react to each other and psychologically and talk and how we work with each other, behave. And one thing I did try to show is how the end times, there would be a revival of the way of Cain and how Cain acted back then in these early times, because Cain was a very powerful and prominent figure, even though the Bible doesn't say much about him. We learn from other sources that he did become fairly powerful and very influential to the people of the day. And even the pagan religion was enacted because of a lot of what he pushed into it. So that's what I'm trying to say is back then and now we see a lot of the same parallels going, just as Jesus said.
Yes, I appreciate that. When I was reading the first few chapters of your new book, it's like, wow, all these connections you make. And in I'm trying to remember, I think it's in this book that we're going over today, in the Rise of Mystery Babylon, The Way of Cain, Part 2. Actually, no, I'm thinking maybe it's Part 1, where you give a really good visual description of what Cain could have looked like according to ancient sources and descriptions and carvings. You mentioned that he would have probably been blonde with like this big blonde beard.
Right.
I really like to have the visual, because all I have is in my mind is Bible stories when I was little, and it's all illustrated, and Cain and Abel both kind of look a little bit alike, and they're both like
Right. Yeah.
dark
Brown
black
hair.
hair.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
wearing basically rags almost. It's like,
Yeah. Right. I've seen those illustrations and such, and of course, again, we see those as children, and we just take it and run with it. But There seemed, if we do a lot of research, and like I said, I've tried to do, I tried to have no holes barred too, to try to explain things, whether they be politically correct or not or whatever. But, a lot of these interpretations of Cain at the time were like when his sacrifice was rejected by God, the smoke from heaven came down and blackened his face, etc. And people have used these things to make it sound like very negative. And I'm like, okay, well, we hear interpretations, but the more I researched, the more I started to find out, in my opinion, the real truths of things. And in these interpretations that we find, sometimes they aren't meant to be exactly what you think, as far as how his face did get dark. It's more about how his soul got dark inside, how he was blackened in his inner heart, okay? Because that makes a lot more sense knowing Cain as he was. Now, there's other accounts that we hear about the original Sargon, okay? Sargon was of
Yes.
Akkad, of Acadia, okay? And how he was a great conqueror of the time. And you have Sargon too, you have people following after him. But the original Sargon, according to one author that I've done research on, you can actually trace his name, Sargon, to King Cain. Sar
Wow.
is the king, and Gon is an ancient reference to Cain, or a parallel of Cain, maybe even corruption even. So if you put that into light, Sargon was actually thought to have had that blondish hair and that full gray beard, okay? And there's other references to talking about Cain in I think it's in the Middle Ages, but they were talking about Cain and his yellow colored beard. So it was interesting how somebody just brought that out. It's like, where'd you get that from?
Yeah.
And another reason why I go to support that theory, that I actually think Cain was a blonde and had that magnificent hair, is because, for one thing, if we think about Noah, now, again, part of a blessing that God bestowed on some of his chosen people. With Noah, we remember that I don't think he had any blood of the fallen angels, but I do believe he was, especially when he was at his birth, he was blessed by God, because we recall, I think it's the Book of Giants, or Lisa, you'd probably know that, or Noble would know that. But it was that where he was born, he had that shining countenance, right?
Yes. Yeah, sorry, Brett, but I was just saying Book of Enoch. First Enoch describes that whole scenario. But go ahead.
Great. Thank you. He had that shining countenance, and he had his eyes are supposedly lit up. They were really bright, etc. And very thick hair was one of them, almost woolly, they said in the descriptions from what I remember. So you think about it, okay, somebody blessed of God. Again, we think of Noah was blessed of God because of what he had to do, but the angels, before they fell, were blessed of God too. Okay, of course, they were a step above us in many different ways, super spiritual ways. Now, when they fell, obviously, when they did their procreation and messing with human women, their descendants were often known to have blonde hair too, and blue eyes.
Wow.
And red hair.
Yeah, they had those, and that's what we see later on in the giants too, right? The remnants of giant bones with the tuft of red hair still stuck to the skull. So
Right. We get the red hair and we get the blonde hair, and I believe that that's a general inkling of possible origins when you think about blonde hair. And does everybody who have blonde hair? No, I'm just saying, but there, never know, there could be a recessive gene down there that could have been passed on into the human race. But we do know, again, we understand a lot about the ancient giants, and a lot of descriptions throughout history, even into the Roman times, talk about these giants having red hair or blonde hair. So we think about it, if Cain was indeed a seed of the serpent, we also have him fitting right into this scenario with Sargon.
Oh, for sure. I wanted to get your thoughts on this real quick. I just kind of thought of this. The English word king in Hebrew, like you were saying, it's sar, for Sargon. And I think gon, that hard G can be.
King is Melech. Sar is prince.
Yeah. No, I mean, but in English, when they were creating the English language and they gave the name king, the word king in itself sounds a lot like Cain. And so when you said King Cain, I was like, wow, that really sounds like very similar, the way those two names are pronounced. Kind of like Gon, like the last part of Gon is Cain, Gon and Cain. So it has that hard G. Yeah,
Interesting.
in Hebrew it's Melech in Hebrew, but but the English language, we know that that's a really recent language, and a lot of words have been corrupted and twisted and put backwards and everything in the language we speak now. But
Yeah,
just thought I'd put a side note for you to think about there, because King
appreciate
really
that.
sounds a lot like Cain.
King Cain. Yeah, I could tell you where I got a lot of that information. It was called Sargon the Magnificent. And trying to think of the author on that one. But yeah, the book is called Sargon the Magnificent. And I forgot her name, but it's fairly old and it's fairly popular because I used it for this first volume. I used a lot of more common books and common references for the first volume, and I got into a lot of the deeper, more obscured ones for the second. So I'm trying to remember her. When I remember her name, I'll give you guys it. But that's a very interesting book. It's not very long. It's easily available, and it talks a lot about these relations to Cain and Sargon himself.
Wow. Yeah, and I think you cited in the book. I'm looking in your book right now because I remember seeing that was your reference, and I'd never heard of that book before. So thank you.
Oh,
Thank you
okay.
for that, Brett.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
No problem. Let me see if I can pull
I'm
up.
just looking through here. But yeah, so I really love your in-depth research using all these other books. I mean, Book of the Bee, Cave of Treasures, First Book of Adam and Eve, all these other extra biblicals that some I've read through, some I haven't, and just this huge in-depth study in your books, Brett. I would highly recommend anybody who is a serious researcher would get your books, because you have all your references cited in the back, and your end notes. Like, how many pages of those? Like 20, 26, 27 pages. Just
Yeah.
amazing research you've done.
Oh, thank you, Lisa. Yeah. The name of that woman is Sydney Bristow, Sydney Bristow, Bristowe is her name, and it's a really interesting book. I just if anybody's curious, I could always email me. I could always send it to you. But I appreciate that. In the first, like I said, this took me over 20 years to get these three out. So hopefully I do some studying over that time. Go ahead. What were you saying?
No, I appreciate the information, and I love it how you were going over point by point last month when we were reviewing your book. And whenever you are ready, I'm more than happy to continue doing that with you. Just starting with point 9, unless you had any other recent research you wanted to share before we get going.
Actually, I do have one thing before we get into point 9, and the reason I want to get into it a little bit, because I did mention it on the last time that we talked, and it was about the mark of Cain. And I remember I had a little bit of my explanation and thought of the mark of Cain, but I didn't really expand on it because I didn't have the material that I wrote with. It was in the second book. It was in the Tower of Babel. Okay. But I did bring that over, and I wanted to explain a little bit what I believe is the mark of Cain and why. Is that okay with you guys?
Of course.
Yes.
And for those of you in the chat listening, if you have any questions, put it in all caps. Noble is checking out the chat while we're talking, Brett, and he and I will kind of switch back and forth. So if anybody has questions for Brett or for us, please put it in the chat. Go ahead, Brett.
Okay. Like I said, the one that I found, doesn't seem very remarkable, or it's not like it's flowery or anything that sounds exciting, like a horn or a bugle or anything that, a mark on his forehead or something like. It's not the one. What I meant was, it was something of a enigma that was brought, a stigma, a mark on him, and as far as everybody who would view him. In other words, the way everybody around him was thinking was now changed. And that was the mark that he brought on to the world. And now I'll explain a little bit. One of the books, did you two ever hear the book of the Generations of Adam?
Yes, I have not read that, but I've heard of it.
Okay. Yeah, it's kind of obscure, and it does have a quote in there which kind of set me off thinking, could this be what the real mark is? And it said, could it be? And this is the quote from the book. A mark which shall be not eradicated until the end of time. Thou wicked Cain, thy deeds shall follow thee, for from thee shall flow murder and bloodshed. Nevertheless, no man shall slay thee, for thou shalt live to see the full measure flowing from thine iniquity until the final destruction of the darkness of this world. So what I'm thinking about this is, this mark was there for a reason, obviously. It was to protect him, right? But he was also meant a mark that shall not be eradicated until Cain is dead. And even in this extra biblical text that says a mark which shall not be eradicated until the end of time. And I'm thinking, okay, could there have been a correlation between that's mark of Cain? What if it was something in the attitudes of people around him that have changed? Could that still be around today? And I honestly, in this third volume, I'm going to try to link that to way a lot of people think today. And as you will read or hear what I'm saying here, you might be starting to figure it out. Okay, I'm going to do a little bit of reading here from that last volume that I had. So could Cain now have become the stigma, a mark to others on what to do or what not to do? This stigma could have stemmed directly from the minds of the people around him, wanting to kill him, a new way for other people to look at him. Now, at this time when God gave him that mark, because he was all afraid that he was going to get killed by these people around him, now the people were looking at him differently. Rather than taking him out on the spot, rather than saying right away, we know you're guilty, Cain, you did it, we're going to take you out right away. That was so plain and so easy to understand. But now with this new mark on everyone around him, things are a little more gray, in the people's minds. People are thinking, okay, well, instead of immediately trying to kill him and saying that he did it, maybe we should just question ourselves. Maybe he had issues. Maybe we should just send him away. Just leave us alone, Cain. Go away. Maybe you have enough problems. All these thoughts, maybe a little compassion was coming in, and maybe it's not my concern. Maybe all these thoughts that people were taking upon themselves, rather than being a direct agent of God and saying, you did it, an eye for an eye, let's just finish this off here. These other thoughts were starting to come in to say, okay, well, he'll suffer himself, leave him away. Now, if you think about it, that would indeed allow Cain to be protected if people began to think these ways, right? Because instead of immediately wanting to kill them, they would say, okay, just let him alone. And it would help reinforce his land of Nod, where he had to go wandering. Remember? Because he was supposed to wander for the rest of his days. Okay. Yeah. And as that reference to the book of the generations of Adam said, it will not be eradicated until the end of time. What if a lot of these thoughts that we hear, because we see it in the news every day, it's just like things happen that seem so obvious and so intense, especially politically, people will look at it, a lot of people, and say, well, we're not quite sure. I don't want to get involved. I think, other people can handle it. That's not the response that probably was before, when everybody just figured out Cain did something so horrible back then.
Right.
But now kind of these same thoughts are manifesting today. And it would work in all different ways. Now, maybe Abel, I think what I will do, I get a lot more into this whole confrontation between Cain and Abel in the second volume, okay? But when I do, we find out that Abel was actually a little stronger than Cain, and Cain actually was wrestling him a little bit, and Abel actually got him to the ground and could have finished him off, because Cain was trying to kill him, and God was basically even kind of nudging Abel a little bit. He said, he's going to kill you, better watch out. But Cain stopped, and he thought, okay, well, maybe I'm not going to do what I'm doing here. Maybe it's not right. Maybe I should just, maybe he started thinking these ways, and that's, as soon as he started to leave up his grip, Cain pounced. And then that's when he jumped up and then got Abel and took him down. So maybe God has a way, I've noticed in so many of these stories, and you please tell me, you two, if you think I'm right. Doesn't God have such an ironic way of punishment or recompense, or doing something back to someone who does something like that? Isn't it so ironic the way God makes it?
Yeah, you're right. God has a very creative way of getting back at people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the punishment usually fits the crime too, is what we see. What we saw with the punishments in the garden, the judgment given there. Brett, real quick, there's a question along this topic in the chat from Seeker of Truth.
Okay.
They say, I have a question. Adam and Eve apparently had to have children before Cain and Abel in order for Cain to be able to have a wife, since there was no other way for the world to have been populated. Okay, so I think the question is, did Adam and Eve have other children? And one of those, and I know you've covered this before, but was one of those children Cain's wife, in your opinion?
I believe, and kind of like Zen does, I believe a lot in pre-Adamites, and I believe
Mhm.
that Adam and Eve weren't the only people on the earth at the time. I believe a number of groups of different people were all around there to help work the garden and work as a community. Okay, so that's why it makes sense, because Cain and Abel, especially Cain, was all afraid that other people would come after him, kill them, or kill him for this crime. Where did all these other people come from? If it,
Right.
wouldn't he have just said, "Oh, my brother and sister," or somebody, and And another thing, I think this woman that we hear about, like that, part of the fight, part of the reason for their fight was actually one of their brothers or sisters, I mean, one of their sisters that they had from each brother. So,
Yes.
right. So I believe, I don't believe that, I'm sure they said that Adam had another 30 children, or I think 30 sons. Is that right?
Yes.
When he
Something like
around
that.
that?
Yeah. And
Oh,
maybe there's something about 35 daughters and 30 sons, something like that in the book of
yeah.
Adam and Eve, and also Jubilees and Joshua. They have kind of different numbers, but they're all like kind of a lot of children. And you can
Right.
imagine having that many children when if you live to be over 900 years old, right?
Yeah, right. I mean, that's like 10 times as many as most people here live. That's you got a lot of time.
Oh
So,
yeah.
and they had a lot of earth to have these children move into different areas too, right? We had a lot of space,
Yeah.
at least back
Yeah.
then. So yeah, I think that, just from the research, I think it just points too much towards there being other people on the earth at the time. But again, the main issue here was the fall of the Garden of Eden, and Adam was supposed to be the manager, and Eve was supposed to be his wife, his well, not only wife, but his partner and everything. So that's basically where we get that Genesis 3:15 prophecy that talks about, seeds of Adam versus seeds of Eve and the serpent, and that's basically what a lot of the Bible follows and tracks through the Old Testament to kind of show how that will manifest over time. So yeah, that's why I think it's not that anybody else is important in this and that. I just think there were a number of people on the earth at the time.
Yes, I agree. And whether you call them the people of day 6, the blackheads, I don't know, there's a bunch of names for the people that were created on day 6 in a totally separate account from Adam. And so that, I mean, to me, that's a very, very well-backed theory that there was other people around and that Adam and Eve had other children that Cain could have married.
And my dermatologist killed a lot of blackheads in my day when I was a teenager. Okay.
Okay, not that kind of blackhead, hen.
Oh, okay.
Could the blackheads, could that mean black hair?
Yes,
Could certain, see what I'm saying? Could
yes.
there be another, a bunch of different groups with different colored hair too that are out there? You got brown hair, you got blonde hair, you got black hair.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, that was the name, I believe, from the Sumerian tablets.
Yeah, I heard that one too. You're right. And again, this is not in the Bible. This is the Sumerian text, right, Lisa? So we're not sitting here saying, no, this is an interpretation of the Bible. No, these are pagans writing these ancient texts from ancient Sumeria in the land of Babylonia.
Yes, exactly, Brett. All right, so Seeker of Truth said, thank you for answering the question. Did you see any other questions in the chat, hun, before Brett gets going here with his book?
Just the other one you said, I think they answered.
Okay. Yeah, thank you guys for all participating. This is a very friendly chat, and we're more than happy to field your questions. If you can try to have it kind of coincide with the subject that we're talking about, that helps so that we don't go off on 10 million different rabbit trails here.
Okay, so
Dale in the chat is wondering, I don't think you said this, but he thought he might have heard you say, Brett, that Cain is still alive. You didn't say that, right?
No, I didn't say that. I didn't think that Cain was still alive. I think he probably was taken out by was it Lamech, I think.
Yeah, as in Jasher.
Yeah. No, I think the spirit, that the mark of Cain may still be around today. That's what I was trying to say.
Yes, yes, yeah.
The
Okay, that's
the
good.
rationale, and I think people nowadays, even though they may not even know they're using it or falling for it, because I hear so many people, and I see so many people around thinking, why do you fall for that? Why do you see this person is obviously guilty or doing something wrong? It's just so obvious, but why is there always that thought of, let's just leave him alone, let's just ignore what he's doing, let's not get involved, those type of things. So that's why I kind of think that may indeed still be around us. And people utilize and can use it to their own advantage who follow the way of Cain, and who like, at least hypothetically, are in his own neighborhood and under his own spell.
Yes, yeah, and you go into very great detail on this in your new book. There's another quick question here from Seeker of Truth, just to follow up with your answer that you gave from last time, Brett. Is there an extra biblical text that might give the reader the idea that there were other people created that were not related to Adam and Eve? Like we just talked about the people of day 6. Is there a specific text? I mean, I can think of like Legends of the Jews. Are you aware of any other text, Brett, that kind of spells that out?
Yeah, the Bible.
Very good.
I hate this. I studied this very hard. Again, it's just myself, but again, it's my own interpretation theme. But I did do a lot of studying with the strong numbers and etc. in the Bible. And when we do talk about, this is kind of really going off subject. I'll just try to say it as succinctly as I can. But especially, let's say, going aboard the ark, we hear the beasts of the fields, we hear the fowl of the air, we hear the behemoth, we hear different same groups of animals. Okay, we hear that and we think, okay, Noah brought all the animals aboard. Okay, but the thing that I am starting to wonder is, because if you look through the Bible, and again, when you hear these words, beast, fowl, those are interpretations. Those are interpretations of people who translated the Bible into English. Okay, they assume that these are animals because they assumed at the beginning that Adam and Eve were the first people, and everybody came from them. So they're not really reading into and looking at the deeper part of the text of the Bible. If they look, because they'll see some of these quote beasts, which the name is Chai. Okay, that's like Noble. You could probably help me on this one. Obviously, you would probably know all about that. But Chai, Chay, they basically, one of the definitions is community. Okay, it doesn't say community of animals in the Strong's. It says community, a group, whatever. So you think about it. Okay, well, the group of people who did this, or people who were there, and this and that. You have these other terms, and they almost always are talked about in the same way. Okay, that you hear about them having hands and having feet later on in the Bible, in the Old Testament. You hear referring to that. We're referring to being grouped in with Adam and man together. There was one verse, and I could find it in the Bible, but I'd have to kind of search for it. But they're talking about the animals, there's certain like cattle and etc. And then in the other part of the verse, they're talking about the Chai and Adam and man, in other words, because Adam and man is the same thing. So it's like grouping them together. It's like, why would you group animals in one side and then group animal and man on the other side? So I have a lot of that in probably, I think it's the second volume, but that's basically what I believe, is that for some reason the Bible keeps grouping these 4 or 5 different groups, the fowl of the air, beasts of the field, the behemoth, and for some reason they group them together, and that's where I think comes those groups of people. And that's not all. I think the giants were even brought aboard the ark, but of course a lot of people are probably not going to jive with that. But I believe that they had to have gone somewhere, because the Bible said that nobody survived the flood, and that would include hybrid humans. They would not have survived the flood, because the Bible, I don't go against the Bible. That's why I try not to, because I don't think the Bible would not say that no one survived the flood and then turn around when we find out some giants hid under cellars or underneath the ground or did something and survive. That the clashes. What do you guys think?
Yeah, and also too, when it says the 8 souls were saved on the ark, that's I think in New Testament. But when you consider that these other entities do not have souls, then there's no reason why they would be included with those 8 people, right?
Right. They're absolutely right. You're right. If they're, and another take I have, I'm going to go too much off here, but another take I have on souls is consciousness a lot of times, conscious mind, conscious thinking. Because you think about somebody who's soulless, you call them soulless, and in a sense, it's true because they're not really thinking with their conscious mind. They're not using common sense. They're acting, and you might have heard people that talk, and you think that they're soulless because they don't really have any direction in life. They don't care. They don't only care about themselves. It's like, okay, but that I think is one of those ancient interpretations of words and such that have fallen off the map, but they meant something a little different. And once we see them in this light, then we can kind of make sense of it.
Right. Like they don't really have a conscience or something. It's very strange to try to interact. Or I've had a bunch of, I hate to say it, but as a former psychologist, I've had clients that just didn't seem to have any conscience whatsoever. It was just like they would just do stuff and not care if other people got hurt, not care if they hurt themselves. It's very strange to try to counsel people that are like that.
Right. Yeah. And that it is kind of fascinating because, and another thing that I think is when we talk about 8 souls, the reason why I think, and there's 2 New Testament quotes, I think, that talk about the 8 people that survived, and they're both souls, I think, or else they just say the 8th or the 8. Mm-hmm. And the interesting is that I'm thinking is, okay, why do you say souls in that particular verse? Why don't you just say the only 8 or the 8 people? Is because I think, again, we know that the Bible from the beginning is talking all throughout it, not only about it, but all throughout it. It's about this struggle between the seeds of the serpent and the seeds of Adam, okay, in Genesis 3:15. So I believe when we talked about those certain souls going aboard the ark, I think when we talked about Noah, there was 8 people that were of this particular seed. Not that any are any better or any worse going aboard the ark, and doesn't mean that nobody else went aboard the ark. But I think, again, in holding true to what the Bible is trying to say, that this prophecy did eventually get fulfilled with Jesus. I think they were kind of going down the line and saying, okay, even in the New Testament, they're saying, those 8 souls that were eventually had a chance to help form the Messiah.
Yes, it's such an intriguing topic. We could talk about this particular thing the entire show, I think, but we got to get moving. I think we should get moving here. Are you ready?
Okay.
Oh, Noble's got something.
I don't mean to throw a wrench into the conversation, but you got to remember now, when you read your Old Testament, okay, in your Bible, the Old Testament is the majority of the new Bible translations and versions are from the Masoretic text. And the Masoretic text is a corrupt Old Testament that was perpetrated by who else? The opponents of Yeshua himself. Remember now, rabbinical, or in this case, the scribes and Pharisees, especially after Rabbi Akiva's master plan of rewriting the Old Testament. This is where the Masoretic text comes from. So be on guard when you read your Old Testament. Check it, double check it, maybe with the Alexandrian Septuagint, which is in Greek actually, but they have English versions of it. But the Septuagint is actually far more accurate, and especially with quoted Old Testament passages in the New Testament. I mean, have you ever looked at those quotes in the New Testament and gone back in your Old Testament and say, this doesn't look the same? Why are the words different? Because the Masoretic text is a corrupted version. It definitely omits a lot of the messianic passages, scripture passages. So keep in mind now, that when you're talking about Genesis 2, you have to double check it with other Old Testament sources other than your current Bible. I hate to say this, but a lot of our Bibles today, the Old Testament, is from the Leningrad Codex, also known as the Masoretic text. So be on guard, be a Berean, be a worker that's, again, showing yourself approved, and double check your Old Testament readings. Okay,
Noble?
I'm off my high horse.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Thank you, Len.
And I didn't mean to interrupt like the very end of last topic we talked about when last month. I was like talking away, and all of a sudden we ran out of time, so I felt bad. I want you to tell me a little more. Could you tell me just really quickly, Noble? But who was that rabbi? Can you give me a quick summary of what he did and why?
Rabbi Akiva.
Mm-hmm.
Rabbi Akiva, first of all, wasn't even Jewish to begin with. He's a Gentile convert, but he is also known as the father of rabbis in a sense because shortly after he was actually around during the time of Paul, and when the so-called new Christians were using the Septuagint because they were reading Greek. Greek was a lingua franca of the day during the Bible times, and so they would use the Septuagint to prove that Yeshua was the Messiah, and the rabbis and the Pharisees had to counter it because they did not accept Yeshua as the messianic figure. So Rabbi Akiva had a master plan that they would rewrite the Old Testament. And how convenient that after 70 AD, when Rome destroyed Jerusalem and the temple, whatever copy, whatever source they used for the Old Testament that the Septuagint got it from was destroyed. And so Rabbi Akiva said, okay, let's write our own, Old Testament now, because now we can actually alter it and include all of our oral traditions.
Absolutely.
And remember, the oral traditions is something they're always going to try to stick in there. And not only did they do that, but they also, Rabbi Akiva gave the order, hey guys, I want you, all of my lieutenants and soldiers, to go around the Middle East and try to get a hold of every Septuagint copy you can and destroy them. So then there's no record of what the original Hebrew says, as ours will be the major and only existing copy. Unfortunately, that didn't work out because there are many Septuagint copies that did arise later on. And now, when you compare the Septuagint to the Masoretic Old Testament, you will see the differences. And there's a lot of examples, especially messianic passages, that just don't make sense in the Masoretic. And again, that's the part where you have to do your own diligent research. So
was that rabbi the one that basically, I heard something just last week on a Bible study on program. Was he the one that actually, because they stopped doing sacrifices at the temple, was he the one who turned around and started to say that there's a certain way to get into heaven now through good works or certain kind of amount of like leveling the amount of works higher than bad deeds? Did you hear about that? Could he have been the one that basically started that new modern way of looking at and going to heaven?
Oh God, I'm not sure about that, Brett. I probably have to do some research on that.
Okay.
But what's interesting is that when you look at the Hebrew text that we use today, the modern Hebrew text, this is something created by the Masoretes and Akiva and his company. Originally, it was the Paleo Hebrew that was the pictograph of the Hebrew language. Well, Akiva pretty much did away with that and instituted a new type font, which is the modern day Hebrew we use today. So if you take a biblical Hebrew class, what you see now is that so-called type font that Akiva came up with and his Masoretes, vowel points adding on to consonants that were never there before. And so again, it was a master plan. And I have to give it to Akiva. He was pretty smart in trying to implement the fact that Yeshua was not a part of the messianic prophecies, and they tried to take him out from the very beginning.
Of course.
In fact, when you go to synagogues today, they have the Torah reading, the Torah portion, and then they have the Haftorah portion, the prophets. When you read the prophets, especially like Isaiah and Hosea and other prophets that have messianic passages in there, they have excluded or taken out those parts of the readings in their synagogue service. Why? Because they don't agree that the Messiah is Yeshua. And that's why they just pretty much took it out. I know we're off track, but you read in the New Testament how when Yeshua was reading in the synagogue in Nazareth, and he read the Isaiah passage, and he said that
It's now fulfilled.
this passage that you've just heard is now come to fulfillment. In other words, I am He. He read the Isaiah passage, and from that point on, the synagogues has never read that Isaiah passage again. So Yeshua was recorded as reading that in their synagogue Torah portion, but now it's nowhere to be found.
Wow.
So Yeshua actually changed the synagogue ritual of reading the Haftorah, the prophets, and so that's pretty interesting, and yet pretty cool, because whatever has to deal with Yeshua is taken out in the rabbinical liturgy.
And Patrick says here in the chat that Akiva sounds like the first pope. Interesting comparison. That was funny.
Yeah,
that's funny. It's pride, man's pride. You got to put, they try, like, people try to insert their own opinions and their own traditions in, and even warns us in the Bible, and especially in the New Testament, about the insertion that the adding of one's traditions into the whole text that's the problem.
Yes, and that pride thing, that's like you mentioned in your book, that's part of the way of Cain and the serpent doctrine.
Yeah, right. I mean, Christine even writes that Akiva killed the true past. And if you turn back to our program, Hebrew Hawaiian, the last 7 classes I think I've taught on have focused on what's the best Bible and how Yeshua changed the synagogue and rabbinic liturgy. Yeah. So again, it is Isaiah 61. Thank you, Sherry. So again, if you have not caught those programs that I taught on, look back on Hebrew Hawaiian, the last 6 or 7 classes that I taught on. That will help give you more in-depth information on what I just shared with you. Sorry about that, Brett. Go ahead.
No problem. Cool. That's interesting. Real quick, I hear Sherry said something about Noah asked Yahweh about taking away, destroying 90%, but having to leave a remnant of 10%. I think
you're aware of that passage in Jubilees. I've stuck it in the chat there for Sherry. She just asked you for a reference, but that was in Jubilees, where it talks about after the flood, there was just like Noah's grandchildren, especially, were getting attacked and tempted and all kinds of stuff by all these demons that were just loose. And so he petitioned. I think you're aware of this one. He petitioned to God, and God said, yes, I'll talk to their master, Mastema, and Mastema petitioned, saying, no, some of them need to stay out there so we can to tempt mankind, or to distinguish between those who are following the Most High and those who want to follow the ways of the serpent. And so God said, okay, we'll leave out 10%. The rest of them have to go to the pit until the last days. So
right.
You remember that, you're familiar with that. Yeah, in Jubilees. I think it's Jubilee 6.
Is it Jubilee 6?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. 10%. I heard of that. And I think that's also in Legend of the Jews, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Okay.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, they talk about 10% being of the souls of those who departed, whether probably the souls of the giants, a lot of them, that were corrupt, they stayed upon the earth. And the other 90% went down to the darkness of the deep.
Yep, the dead spirits of they weren't dead, but the spirits of the dead Nephilim. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Demonic entities.
Disembodied. You use the word disembodied.
Okay,
I like that word.
Yeah.
Okay. Now we get back to, we talked about last time, we talked about the positive things that we're seeing, and not positive in a good way, but just positive as far as identification of what the way of Cain in this world around us is, what we're seeing. And I had 2 verses that actually was two blocks of verses, Jude 11 through 19, Jude 1, obviously. And then I had 2 Peter 2, 1 through 20. And I won't read them again, but if you want to research those are almost the same in a lot of ways, because a lot of times they say almost the exact same thing. And Jude actually says, woe to them, for they have gone in the way of Cain. So it actually announces it right at the beginning of the verse. So So what I did was I thought, okay, let me just take apart all of the phrases that are in those 2 blocks of verses, and I did come up with 10 different but alike in many ways ways that we can see how the way of Cain is manifested in today's world. And other ones were like self-will, very, very arrogant and vanity and speaking of things that they understand not, etc. So we did the first 8 already. So we're going to get into number 9 right now. The 8 will be in our last program if you'd like to go check it out. Number 9.
Just
Go
so
ahead.
you're aware, Brett, real quick, I believe we are taking a break in about 7 minutes or so,
Okay.
maybe 8 minutes. So just be aware. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I'll just let me know, please. Thank you, if you could.
Okay, sure.
Okay, number 9, those who follow in the ways of Cain may often act as think of a person who is very entitled. They think they're very much entitled and they don't really care, how they act when they're with you. And here are some of the quotes that we find. These are spots in your feasts of charity. Spots, they are blemishes. When they feast on you, they feed themselves without fear. They sport in themselves with their own deceivings while they feast with you. In other words, if you invite them to dinner, they'll just take advantage of whatever they have in front of you. They don't care. It's, just do whatever. They'll make sport of whatever around you, and they'll just enjoy themselves. And a lot of times at people's expense around them. And how often do we see that around today?
Yes.
And in Legends of the Jews, we actually find a quote. It says, "It was their carefree life," and this is before the flood. And notice we'll see a lot of these parallels today. "It was their carefree life that gave them space and leisure for their infamies. God is patient with all sins except an immoral life." So in other words, they had it pretty easy in certain respects back then. They didn't really have a lot of goals. And Lisa, as you were talking about a soulless, they probably did develop into something soulless because they may not have they had really no chores. A lot of them probably didn't work. They just sat around and they lived off the fat of the land, and they got lazy. And as you hear, idle time is the devil's workshop, and that is very true because things manifested back then, and things I believe are manifesting right now the same way because of these same attitudes and behaviors.
Right, exactly.
So, okay, what I think happens with a lot of these people back then and today is they're being taught, especially today, they're being taught that, okay, well, does God even exist? He's not really relevant. Science will tell us all the things we need to know, and as a human race, we'll solve all our own problems. God is kind of getting sent out of the picture here. So a lot of these people then, they're starting to try to rationalize the world without God in it, and just saying, okay, well, somehow everything came together the way it is. I know it did somehow, but I just don't know how. But, so then they start to think about things and looking for justification, especially when they do something wrong, which they know is wrong, but they try to talk to themselves and say, well, what Bible, what sense of law do we have here? It's everyone that we think is right in our own eyes is right. So I kind of think this is right. So that's starting to take precedence today, big time again, because how many people look at the Bible and say, especially those who aren't of God, are saying, what is that? That's just written by men. It's not a law. It's whatever we think, And that's basically another way that these people are starting to go. The cycle of disappointment is starting because when things don't work, they start to rationalize things their own way. They think we can make it work. The way of man will help us to solve all our problems. But when things don't, they get a little short of perfection. A cycle of disappointment happens. It hurts them, and then they start to feel down, and then they say, well, no, I can't look to God for this. I got to try to do it myself, and I got to come back up and raise my own self-esteem back myself. But that's the pathway. It starts to go around in circles, and you notice people, I'm sure, around here that have that cycle of disappointment where they're always depressed because they want things perfect, they want to achieve perfection, but it's just not working because you can't do it. You can't do it in an imperfect world.
Exactly. Yeah, that is so common. And it all ties together from that whole entitlement, being raised to think that you can do no wrong, basically, and then it kind of seems to, as these people become adults, if they're grown up, if they grow up in a home where they're made to feel like they are like the king of the house as a child, and then it seems to be kind of a natural progression where when they become an adult, they have those characteristics like you talk about, where they become very depressed because things cannot go, the way that they want it to all the time. And with that whole spirit of it and sense of that entitlement, that's just a huge disappointment for them, and they can't accept that things are not going their way because, through their childhood they were made to feel that they will go their way no matter what. It's such a twisted way of thinking, and a certain way that either parents will raise their child like that unknowingly just because they think that that's the great way to love them instead of discipline. But it creates a lot of what we're seeing today in the younger generation, in my opinion, anyway.
Oh yeah, and I think it's by design too. I think it's totally by design, the way we're being taught. Because again, who controls the schools? Who has control?
Oh yeah. Exactly.
And why are we always making everybody have trophies for just participating? Okay, what if how do you get that feeling when you lose? Because what you lose, then the next time you want to win, and then it gets you stronger. But again, if you want to make somebody weaker, you give them everything they want when they're young, and then or whatever like that, you always give them awards. And then when they start to fail later on in life, what happens to them? They collapse, right?
Yeah. Yes, it is.
Again,
it's a total cycle.
Yeah, by design. There's reasons to get this.
And it looks like we're at break, Brett. Everyone go get something to drink, eat. We'll see you guys in a few minutes.
All right.
As a bookstore for truth seekers, it's our goal to make ancient manuscripts which were once held captive by secretive institutions available for public consideration. In our generation, where wisdom has increased as Daniel the prophet foretold, we have access to many of the testimonies our early church brethren were persecuted for preserving. After being hidden for centuries, these manuscripts have been leaked from various sources throughout the earth, and it's our goal to gather these sources into printable form to make available for all who seek the ancient way. If you're looking to deepen your studies of the biblical narrative, find these ancient manuscripts and more at sacredwordpublishing.com. Your partnership with Sacred Word Publishing goes further than the publishing of ancient manuscripts and weekly video content.
You also make a huge impact across the earth in orphanages in Myanmar, India, Uganda, and Kenya.
Your support is crucial for the development of the ecclesia of real truth seekers.
We thank you for joining us in hosting Secrets Revealed, Momentary Zen, the Digital Readers Club, Ask Me Anything series, and other shows that have helped lead so many to the truth of salvation.
become even more involved, please visit patreon.com/sacredwordpublishing, where you can partake in exclusive, interactive, patron-only content and help us continue shining the light of love in this darkened world.
That the Capitol will ever treat us fairly. You are lying to yourselves because we know who they are and what they do. This is what they do, and we must fight back. You can torture us and bomb us. Fire is catching. And if we burn, you burn with us.
Good evening.
Are you awake yet? I hope. We've tried and we've tried for years and years to use passive resistance and loud voices to make a change. The time is over. Your governments around the world have no other goal than to decimate your entire existence at the hands of the bankers and the elites. The war is coming, and it's your choice to decide if you want to be a warrior or a victim. Denial is not a choice anymore. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station on the planet. Not giving up. Revolution Radio. All right. Thanks for listening while we took that short break here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And now we're going to get back to your host.
Hey, shalom. Welcome back, everyone. We're continuing our show here today with Brett Lee Thomas, who's discussing The Way of Cain and his new book. And we just welcome all of you. We've had such a wonderful, friendly chat. And if you guys have any questions for Brett or for my husband, Noble, and myself, please put them in all caps in the chat, and we'll try to get to them as soon as possible. Try to stay with the topic so we don't go on a ton of rabbit trails during the last hour here. But Brett, are you there?
I'm here.
All right. Oh, yes, loud and clear. Okay, so we were having a great discussion about so many things that has to do with the serpent and with Cain and the last days, which I always love when you link all of your topics into what to expect in the last days. So where would you like to go from here, brother?
Okay, yeah, more to come in the next one. So,
yeah.
Oh, mastema that you talked about earlier?
Oh, yes. Oh, you're talking
another
about
name for the
mastema, yes.
serpent that I found over time. Oh, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, that it fits right in.
A lot of AKAs with that. We got what? Samael, Mastema, Lucifer. Is that kind of along the same lines, Brett?
Yes. Yeah. Well, in my opinion, again, according to the research, there was two main demonic enemies. You've got Samael, obviously Satan, in a spiritual form, and you've got the one that was actually demoted, the serpent himself, in the terrestrial form within the Garden of Eden with Adam. Okay, have you heard the story about? And I don't want to go too far off, but you heard a story about the serpent, and they had Samael couldn't actually go into the garden because God banned his spiritual presence in there, and that's why he had to possess the serpent to go in.
Yes,
speak for him.
You touch you touch on that in your book, and it's also, I think, in Legends of the Jews and Legends of the Bible, if I'm correct. Yeah.
Yeah, so I believe that there are actually two evil entities that, and I think they even talked about in Revelation where that said that that old serpent was going to be released, and the devil. So the devil is kind of a general term. It's more of anything that's malevolent, especially because people, things can be devilish, etc. So it's not like, when you say the devil, of course, you're kind of talking about, the top dogs, but the top ones. But basically, I think that they are two in tandem, but I think they're separate in their own way. So a lot of the worship that you find in this world stems from the worship of the serpent himself. And of course, it's backed by Samael, Satan, on the spiritual realm. Okay, but I don't think they can actually go into this physical realm where they never could. So that's the difference. Okay, the serpent could have back then. And a lot of these things, like Amalek, you've heard of Amalek, right?
Yes.
Okay, they talk about actually, and I think it's even in the Bible about there were some wars going on with Nimrod and destroying Amalek and the children of Amalek and such right after the flood. Okay, but the thing was, I know Amalek is like a grandson or a descendant of Esau, but that was way before Esau.
Right.
That was way before the time of Esau. So Amalek must have been somebody else or a group of other people. And I found during the research, especially in the Zohar, they talk about Amalek as being another name for the serpent, the evil serpent. So he must have had other descendants and other children who actually became like a group, the Amalekites. Not the same as the other ones I was saying, but another group. Because I think it's also in the Bible that says God will fight with the children of Amalek from generation to generation, and it will not cease until the very end. And that's true if you think about it, because we are at enmity with the sons of the serpent all the way up to the end times.
Right.
Those Amalekites under Esau were destroyed. They weren't around for very long. You don't see any Amalekites claiming their own around today. So that's what I'm saying. Amalekite is probably another word for the serpent.
Right. And then, other extra biblicals, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Gospel of Nicodemus, where there's an ongoing discourse between the Prince of Death and the Prince of Hell. So there's these two lead guys that are up there. So that would make sense that, there's more than just one. And
that's interesting.
Yeah.
What was that? What was that? Gospel of Nicodemus?
Yeah, Gospel of Nicodemus. There's this ongoing, kind of in the last half of the book, there's when Yeshua is getting ready to descend into hell, and the Prince of Death is announcing that he rushes down to the gates of hell, to the Prince of Hell, and is announcing, guess what? This guy that we've been following here on earth, I've been following his every move and trying to trip him up, trying to send all my Pharisees and everybody after him, and now he died, and he's getting ready to descend into hell and break the gates open. And so the Prince of Hell is like, what? He can't take away all the guys I have under me down here. It's a very interesting discussion they're having.
Oh, interesting.
Kind of very prideful and blaming each other for everything that's going wrong.
Of course. We see that around every day, right? There's another way of Cain.
Yep, exactly.
Never was Cain's fault, right?
No, always trying to put the blame.
Yep. Yeah, I got a lot to say about that too later. Sherry she brought that verse, Revelation 12:9, and the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent. There you go, called the devil, and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. Now, again, Noble would probably know a lot more about this. Would you know about the Greek there, and that maybe how it could have been? Because I'm thinking, people assume, again, when they translate it, assume they're all one. So they could have said that he was cast into the earth and his angels, but when they said called the devil and Satan, could that have meant maybe the two groups here, the two different entities? That old serpent called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. Could that have been two? Noble, what do you think? Huh?
What chapter was
12 verse 9.
Revelation 12:9.
12:9.
Thanks for putting that up, Sherry. The moderators here in the chat are so good. They always put up all these references so that people know what we're talking about. Thank you, Sherry and Tammy. We appreciate you too.
Great serpent.
Noble's taking a look at that right now.
Diabolos and so yeah. So they I'm sorry, I'm just looking at the Greek, and again it mentions them by name. I mean the dragon, and then the great Ophis, which is the serpent. They got Diabolos, the devil, Kai, Hosantanas. So yeah, Diabolos and Satan. So the devil and Satan is mentioned.
So could that be two figures?
Well, see, the thing is, it could be an apposition meaning that they're both talking about the same thing.
Mhm.
It all depends on how the conjunction kai is used in this passage. Um, the way it's going though, it seems like it's talking about one individual, you know, that goes by many names. I mean, you have to remember that multiple names are used by figures, especially of leadership. I mean, even Yahweh himself, God Almighty, has multiple names. Yeshua has other names, tagged along to his
Yeah,
name.
I agree.
So yeah, so
You
again,
have, go ahead. Yeah, Satan the accuser. That's basic. So it's another title, like you're saying. So
yeah,
yeah, it could be. But I still, according, there's a lot of other texts that also talk about them being separate, because of their realms that they lived in, and they talk about.
I
Go ahead.
actually think that there's more than one adversary, out there. I mean, it's not God against Satan, and that's it. I mean, you mentioned Samael before. I mean, I think there's a host of evil out there that have different parts and different claims. So I don't think it's a one-on-one battle. I believe it's one against everything else that goes against God. So again, uh, you've done the research though in this area, so
And there is that hierarchy, and it even talks about the Bible. In the Bible, the principalities, the rulers of darkness in high places. We talk about
Yes.
right.
Exactly.
There's a whole hierarchy of those. It's like an army.
Yes, exactly. And the good armies have multiple generals, you know.
Mhm.
So again, I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case here.
Yeah. What I meant to say about this number 8 here, the only other comment I wanted to make here is, assuredly, God, this is not how God wanted humans to exist. He did not want us to be in this cycle of self-destruction, as like I said, just living that life, it will gain one. He wants us to be as strong and self-sufficient as possible. In other words, to stand on our own 2 feet and understand our own flaws and be the best we can be. I talk a lot about that in the next book, is because I think it's just important to understand what blessings mean. Blessings mean, it doesn't mean just having a blessing, a child or whatever only. It's also being a blessing to yourself and to others around you, because that's how, loving your neighbor as thyself, that's how a community actually works, is when everybody around them cares and is blessing to each other. So it just, again, these are such common sense, in my opinion. It just, things that people let fall by the wayside, we should really kind of just think about these things and what blessings are. And then if we start to go down a path of cynicism and envy and entitlement and stuff, just start to wonder why, and maybe figure out that really quickly that that's not going to bring us up. It's going to bring us down.
Yes. Hey, Brett, there's a quick question in the chat from Think Good Thoughts. Says, hello, is a question, if the snake represents evil, does the bird symbol represent good? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, my thoughts, especially doing a lot of research here over the years about, again, it's fascinating, because I think there are certain things that were symbols back then, and it made sense when they put them into the ancient texts and stuff, and a lot of people probably knew what these symbols meant back then, but today it became obscured, so you don't think about it, and you're like, okay, what does that mean? Like a bird, in my opinion, in a lot of senses, is a perfect example. I believe a bird a lot of times represents, in the Bible and in like outside pagan lore, etc., it represents something up that's heavenly. Maybe when they talk about a deity, let's say in ancient Sumeria, and he's got a bird head, I believe that was representing something of saying that he was a god, came from the sky. He had the power to come through the veil, in and out of the veil, just like he had swiftness, just like wings, because we hear about wings and you see Nike and you hear about the swiftness, and you think about it with Mercury, they had the winged feet, or the winged shoes like a bird. I believe that actually didn't represent that he could fly, but I believe that actually more represented that he had a lot of, this particular god, Mercury, this pagan god, had a lot of swiftness in being able to come in through the supernatural and gather stuff out of it and communicate with the supernatural. So he can come in and out of the supernatural very swift, very quick. And he had so much easy potential to go through it. Because most of us, we've all heard of that veil, right? You know, the veil is the thing that stops us from seeing the angelic world around us or anything that's around us. It's like that barrier that stops the natural, anything from the natural world. Some maybe even animals can sense a little bit almost through the veil, like a dog can sense something that's not right around, that's on the other side of the veil. So that's what I think. The bird doesn't necessarily mean that it's good and the serpent evil. I think the bird is just a symbolic gesture of something that either comes from the sky or comes from the heavens or is associated with the heavens. What do you guys think?
That's interesting, Brett. My Jewish professor always taught, especially in the New Testament, that a lot of times the birds, that picked up the seed from the sower, for different type of grounds and whatnot. A lot of the passages that the bird represented evil. So
yeah. Well, and also too in the book of First Enoch, they have the animal farm parable that's kind of near the end of the whole book, and in that parable, the birds do represent evil. But I think that I agree with both of you. Like they do represent heaven, but Satan can always twist everything for his purpose as well.
Mm-hmm.
And depending on what type of bird, also. Because Enoch is very specific with the types of the birds.
But Noah sent the dove out to see if there's dry land. I mean, a lot of good applications. But then remember, our Jewish prof said in the New Testament that a lot of times it was pictured as evil.
Yeah.
So that's really good question. That's a really good question, though.
That was good. And we do have the dove. I mean, the dove really doesn't looked upon as evil. It's a bird.
Right. I mean, they're used for sacrifices as well. Turtle doves.
Oh, yeah.
And, yeah, so it's a really, I guess it depends on the type of bird and the context it's used in as well. But good question, good thoughts.
Good one. I totally agree with you too, Noble. I mean, I think why would you, again, I always try to use common sense. I think why would God want a bird sacrifice if it's something evil? Like,
right.
He would not want that. He would want something pure and obviously good to be sacrificed, right? Just like that's why, we talk about goats and sheep and, some inhabited the left side, some inhabited the right side, etc. So I think there's just like you said, Neville, I think there's something more to it, possibly.
Yeah. And it's funny though, when you think about it, when there's big battles and dead corpses all on the battlefield, it's mentioned that the birds will eat the flesh of those dead people. You know what I mean? I think there was a moment in Mel Gibson's movie, the of Jesus,
the
Passion of Christ.
Yeah.
Remember on the cross, the evil thief. What was his name again? There's two thieves on Jesus' left and right. Demas was one.
Lenthus.
Yeah.
Demas.
But remember the raven or the crow was picking on his face when he's on the cross.
Oh. The evil thief.
Yeah. So.
Man. Interesting.
It is interesting.
Yeah, somebody mentioned in the chat, King Tut's headdress has both snake and bird. And I think that's correct. And I think that's how they love to show off their paganism there, is because, again, the Egyptian paganism stems from back where Garden of Eden, where we have the serpent, worship of the serpent. So they're out there bragging on their king how much of a pagan he is, and he gets his information right from the source. And the bird too, it shows that his divine nature, that he's from heaven and that he associates with heaven. So that's, again, the bird is symbolic, in my opinion, of how his divinity and how he comes from heaven. So it's interesting, those symbols. I think a lot of times how they're manifested.
Yeah, I think Sherry Papin also mentioned that there was an evil bird called Ziph.
Oh, I heard, yeah.
Ziz. Maybe it's Ziz.
Ziz? I'm not sure.
Ziz. Z-I-Z.
Z-I-Z? No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's mention Legends of Jews. It might be different than what she's talking about. I don't know.
I think it's the Legends of the Jews. Do you know anything about that, Lisa? Because I read about it, but I didn't really get into it.
Yeah, it's really super deep. Like I have never read it anywhere else besides Legends of the Jews about this particular creature called the Ziz and its role in creation. And Legends of the Jews has some really interesting narratives about why God created certain creatures a certain way. And The Ziz is this bird. I mean, I don't want to go way off topic, but if you haven't read it, read the book 1 of Legends of the Jews. I think it's like in the first 3 chapters. There's so much about that particular crazy bird.
And one more thing I want to mention, if that's okay, is and I know I'm going off topic of my own topic, but I believe that water had another significance way back then, and I believe water, when we talked about water, a lot of times it was actually in reference to the veil, crossing the veil to the supernatural itself, because you hear about Leviathan, and Leviathan is that evil serpent that dwells in the sea.
Yeah.
And we know when the Bible talks about the sea and such, what I believe what the sea meant, I could have almost a reinterpretation of the first chapter of Genesis, because it's I took a look at it, it's kind of interesting. But we know God created the sea back then in the early part of Genesis. Could this have been meaning that God actually created the sea? In other words, he created the veil and he divided the supernatural from the natural. So we couldn't see it. So he created the sea there to stop us. So in other words, it's the sea, the water, because we talk about certain gods coming out of the water, and that's just pagan gods coming out of the water. Did they come out of the physical water, or did they actually come out of the water of the supernatural, come from the supernatural world somehow? We got to think common sense here, and these things that makes sense, because again, if we think about it, in Revelation, we talk about God saying, at the very end, after he comes back, and there will be no more sea.
Right.
So again, that's fascinating. If you think about it, okay, does that mean there's going to be no more water? No, I don't think there's going to be no more water at the end times. At the end of the end times, I think possibly and quite probably there will be no more need to have that blockade of the veil blocking the supernatural from our world. Now we could basically, and I've heard sermons about this too, where it's now we'll be able to vision and see the angels around us and etc. at the end of the end times. What do you guys think?
Yes, I think you're right on about that. And I also believe too that when there's no more oceans, it'll be very similar to what it was like around before the flood, where it was only rivers mentioned in Genesis chapter 2, the rivers of Eden, and then also the fountains, which is translated as like lakes. So I think that's something that is in prophecy. It's mentioned in Second Esdras and Revelation, and I believe in Daniel as well, where, like you said, there will not be oceans anymore.
Interesting.
Well,
Yeah,
Rick Smith gave a couple passages, Psalm 50:11 and 80:13, about references to Ziz.
Oh, to the Ziz.
Yeah.
Wow, it's in the Bible.
No, but I actually checked the Psalm 50 passage.
Okay.
And in the Hebrew, it says again that I know all the birds of the mountains, and then it says Veziz, and the wild beasts of the field are mine. So actually, the word Ziz refers to beasts, or actually, how does it? They talk about moving things. Okay, the definition could be moving things. Could be birds, but could be beasts. But it's, and the Strong's Concordance, it says beasts. And the BDB, they talk about it, and it says it's reptiles, collective reptiles. So I haven't checked 11, actually Psalms 80 yet. But thank you, Rick, for the references. I'll look into it because it's good to have references in Scripture.
Yeah, and it's so obscure though. That's the thing about it. You hear it a couple times, and then you're like, okay, what does that mean? It must have meant something. And people back then must have knew what it meant too, right? Because if they mention, they say it. I bet you it's just like saying a computer today. Most people would know what a Ziz is back then, but it just kind of fell off the planet. Fell off the world here.
Yeah.
Over time.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay. So let's get back to if it's okay, we'll get back to the final one. Those who follow the way of Cain may often act as wandering stars, clouds that are carried about with a tempest and carried about of winds. So pigging back, that's a tough one. Pigging back on the former one, number 9, it's almost like the fulfillment of living that type of life where it's all about you and you don't care and you're almost soulless. And we're talking about, even if these people who continue on and trying to make the best out of this fallen world will temporarily improve their lot, they usually end up falling backwards or just losing it in some way. And again, it's because they're searching for perfection in an imperfection world. And I can't help thinking of like Hollywood elites and people who are stars, and then you look at them after a while and they get into drugs and they just fall. And it's just like, man, if I had all that money and all that fame, I mean, I would just be like happy. I mean, I would feel happy. I would just, why would that all take you down? And I of course I can't say that because I've never been there, but you just think on a common sense level, could they be chasing things that maybe are in this world that aren't quite fulfilling, and they keep falling into that spiral without God?
Yeah, and a lot of it too, I think, is done on screen or in the media for a particular purpose to kind of normalize that like, oh, all these, if you're wealthy and you're famous, you can buy anything, you can buy any type of drug you want, you can just live the life, but in the end, you end up really hurting yourself. And I think that they do that very publicly in the media, like kind of like reading a script in a way, just to normalize it for all the fans, all the younger generation. Think, oh, well, that's normal, to just drink yourself into oblivion and to have this decrepit, horribly immoral lifestyle when you're, especially for the very wealthy.
Yeah. But again, that serves the purpose if that's what they want to do to people.
That
they prop it out there, and they put their puppets out there to just say, here, look at the way they're doing. Let's all join. Everybody join that. There's a reason for everything.
It's normal, and look, you could be just like them, just like the people that they idolize, in the media. It's such a horrible cycle.
Yeah, you can end up just like them too.
Yeah.
So now, one thing I wanted to say, Rick Warren is an evangelist. I listen to him every once in a while, and he did a statement. I just wanted to mention it, but it makes total sense. It says, I'm just paraphrasing. He says, "You were made by God and were made for God, and until you figure that out, nothing is going to make much sense in the world. When you are not living in the purpose that God made for you, you're just existing." And to me, as far as this conversation is concerned, that's so relevant. How relevant that is people are finding their way to almost anything they can else in this world, and they think that'll give them their full satisfaction. But like a drug, it'll only give it for a little bit, and it won't be fulfilling. So that's where you keep that cycle, and you hit that cycle of despair and low self-esteem, and then you're fighting and using your pride. So that's where that cycle begins, is because you leave the creator out of it.
Yeah, totally. I totally agree.
Interesting. Okay, so again, that is basically clouds without a tempest, carried about in winds. We have the Genesis Rabbah has an interesting thought on it. It says, their inward thought is that their house shall continue forever, but the flood will sweep them away in their houses, which will thus become their graves, which is kind of interesting. Again, it's almost like you think you're going to go the way of the world and seek perfection your own way. It's not going to happen. You're going to fall short. Like Icarus. You've heard of Icarus. Okay, it's kind of the same thing.
Yes.
And again, this all can link with Cain and those who are in his camp and follow him and kind of do his ways. One interesting quote from the book of Adam. I don't know if, Lisa, if you heard this and Noble about the midwife. Eve supposedly had a midwife in this book that actually was helping her with the children when they were born.
Interesting. I have not read this book. I've heard of it, but I have not read it. I'd love your quotes that you put right here in your book.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's an interesting one. Because again, that could go right along with there being pre-Adamites and people already in the world, because Eve, had a midwife to help her out with.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because in this book, the midwife as soon as she sees Cain, she has an inkling and she has an epiphany, and she does not like him right off the bat. And this is what she says: the midwife, because this, again, he's a small child, he's a baby, he just, he came out a little while ago, but she has that sense. Ever notice how some people already have that sense, and they just know about certain people that, they're not good, whatever.
Yes.
The
yes.
midwife, I'm sorry.
No, I just said yes, totally.
Okay. The midwife, this is in the book of Adam 21.3b. The midwife replied to him, Cain, and told him, God is just that he did not at all leave you in my hands, for you are Cain, the perverse one, killer of the good. Remember, he didn't even do anything yet, but she knows.
Wow.
For you are the one who plucks up the fruit-bearing tree, and not him who plants it. You are the bearer of bitterness and not of sweetness.
Wow.
So it's interesting that if she had her way, she might have, allowed Abel to live. It's kind of fascinating. But, imagine and just see all the things that she saw. She saw that his ways were not bearing fruit. They were just plucking up the fruit and using it and just abusing it and not putting back into it, and making things bitter and not sweet. It's just interesting how, again, when you see certain people, the way they act, when they act using the ways of Cain, that they start to act like that, and the world starts to suffer because of it.
Yes, that reminds me of what they did here in Hawaii about 10 years ago, where they outlawed having any fruit-bearing trees and government property along the sidewalks of Waikiki. There used to be quite a few fruit trees. You could just pick some fruit and eat it as you're walking along. And even in certain communities like where we live, we're not allowed to have them in our front yards even. So that's what that fruit tree reminded me of. And of course, we know the government is running things very similar to how they did before the flood with Cain, right?
Yeah. How dare you have nutrition to eat?
Exactly. Just have any tree that doesn't have fruit you can have.
That's nice. So you could just eat those branches and get some nice nutrition.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's in Jeremiah 12:10, we have, many pastors have destroyed my vineyard. They have trodden my portion underfoot. They have made my pleasant portion a desolate wilderness. They have made it desolate, and being desolate, it mourneth unto me. The whole land is made desolate, because no man layeth it to heart. And that's interesting. In other words, they don't have the heart to care. A lot of people just don't care what happens to the world. And I think, again, that's part of people who get into the ways of Cain. The world is no longer becoming a harmonious order, a working system or arrangement. Now it's just heading towards chaos. And I think that's exactly how things end up when you follow the ways of Cain.
Right, exactly. And then, of course, the elite, they like to come in and create the chaos and then bring order to it, so they look like the heroes. And I'm sure that's a way of Cain as well.
Yeah. They're the ones who, they want things that just all go wrong, and then they're like Superman to come save it. Okay, here you give us purpose, right? Send us money. So in the Genesis Rabbah, we also say, and void refers to Cain, who desired to turn the world back to formlessness and emptiness, chaos being the inevitable result of lawlessness. So it's kind of interesting, again, one way or another. So we get a little bit deeper. Philo actually has this. For there was no other cause for the corruption of mankind except that, being slaves to pleasure and to desire, they did everything and were anxious about everything for that reason only. Moreover, they passed of life of extreme misery. So again, misery is the result of that. And that is another reason why we need laws. We need rules. We can't just do whatever you think. Somebody mentioned it earlier in their chat, do what you will. Okay, Aleister Crowley, right? That black Satanist, or that magician, whatever you call him. That was his phrase. Do whatever you want, And even in the creed of witchcraft, it says, ain't as long as you don't harm no one, do whatever you want. So it's a little bit different, but it's kind of the same, in a way,
Yeah.
But these ways, often, as you'll see with people who do whatever they want, they don't really stay on the straight and narrow.
Right. They veer far away from the commandments of the Most High when they do what they want, because there's that human nature, like you described a bit earlier about the ways of the serpent. Like it's kind of built into everyone from birth to just want to do what you want. It's like human nature to be rebellious, to follow the ways of the serpent, right?
Yeah, and again, that whole story, that Garden of Eden, is just such a parameter to what we see and how we can view things. Because again, we know the serpent, he had pride. We know he was envious of God, right?
Yes.
And we know he coveted. And a lot of these things we see in people nowadays, they can't just like who they are. They can't just like what their talents are, their individual things they have better than a lot of people, and they could capitalize on. They have to be envious, and they have to do exactly the same thing as the serpent and take a lot of the same steps as the serpent to get what they feel they are entitled to.
Wow. Such good connections here. I really appreciate your research.
Oh, okay. Thank you. A couple other things, a couple interesting telltale signs that as we move on. Again, these aren't part of the 10 and those verses, but just other thoughts is one I get into is blushing. Okay. And again, blushing is the ability to show red in your face as an outward sign of someone's guilt. Okay. That makes sense. Okay. And in my opinion, it's a pattern. It's a pattern that God wants us all to follow, whether we blush or not, or whether we can, whatever. I believe that whole concept of understanding if you do something shameful is admitting it and just saying, okay, yeah, you're right, I did it, or whatever, or I understand. Showing it one way or another is that you can understand that you might have done something. And Philo, it doesn't have the greatest quotes all the time, but he does throw in a few zingers I've noticed in research over the years. Here's one that Philo Judaeus he's basically a historian way back in was it the 1st century or the very, very early times around Jesus. But he said, "But he who sins and who thus blushes and is overwhelmed with shame is near akin to him, to God. For those persons who pride themselves on their errors as if they had not done wrong are afflicted with a disease which is difficult to cure, or rather, which is altogether incurable." So again, I talk about this quite a bit in these books. It's either one way or another. If you're going to be, and you see that a lot today, and I hate to say it because I do see people that are actually kind of close to me. And if you'd ever noticed over the years, if you ever noticed, they just can't admit that they're wrong or that they've done something wrong. You ever meet those people?
Yes,
it just
where it seems like they're
fascinates me.
so close. They want to try to say it, but they just cannot bring themselves to admit. It's so I know what you're talking about.
It's kind of like a Fonzie thing. I don't know if you get, but when anybody watches that show, Happy Days, the Fonz can never say he's sorry. He's always goes to the S, and he's like, and he can never do it. But it's just basically, it's some people. That's a telltale sign to me that there's some kind of way of Cain that they're following, because God wants us to admit that we're not perfect and that we do make mistakes and actually ask for forgiveness for them, and I'm sorry, and let's move on. But just there's some people, they just cannot face that of saying, okay, I didn't do something perfect, or I wasn't perfect in a way. And I think it all stems from their desire to be perfect without looking towards God.
Right, of their own accord, where we can't even. There's no one who's good. It says that in Scripture too. We cannot achieve that on our own accord. Our righteousness only comes through Christ.
Right. Yeah, I agree. There's a verse in Jeremiah 6:15. Were they ashamed when they had committed abomination? Nay, they were not at all ashamed, neither could they blush. Therefore, they shall fall amongst them that fall. So it's just interesting. So that's another sign, in my opinion, of just people today who are just kind of caught up in the way of Cain. They just don't want to be humble. They can't just sit there and accept guilt or shame if they do something wrong. And then again, there's nothing wrong with it. We all make mistakes, but it's just for them, it's just they went down that pathway. They just have to do things away from God where they don't want to ever admit anything imperfect.
Wow.
The next thing, another thing is, which I've seen, and we can see this a lot too, especially in the last 100 years, a lack of peace. Okay. The lack of peace inside people who actually go the way of Cain. And of course, in Isaiah 48:22, it says, there is no peace, saith the Lord, unto the wicked. So these people may sound like they're doing it. They may act like they want peace and this and that. And that's where we get, I see it so much, and I'm sure you all do too, is the signs of peace everywhere, especially, you know, of course, in the 60s, you have the upside down broken cross. You've heard that, right? That sign. And of course, you have the two fingers, which I think actually stand for victory, I guess, and they actually stood for victory at one time, but that's what they use for peace. But you hear all these people and you see all these people flashing the peace signs, saying peace, you know, hey, peace. But then there is no peace. Where they're at, there is no peace. Or what they do, a lot of times, not all the time, but a lot of times you see it. It's like in the midst of war, you know, Winston Churchill flashes the peace sign, and you got to wonder, okay, well, why isn't there peace surrounding you? Why is there just fights and troublesome waters around you? That's because we even have in Jeremiah, we have 12:12. The spoilers are come in high places through the wilderness, for the sword of the Lord shall devour from one end of the land even to the other end of the land. No flesh shall have peace, but the wicked are like a troubled sea in Isaiah 57:20, when it cannot rest, whose waters cast up mire and dirt. So again, with the flare of Cain, they're trying to actually do things on their own. They're trying to make their own peace without the peace of God, and it's coming up short. And one of my favorite verses that actually, in my view, kind of shows that a lot of these people who follow these ways end up this way, trying to show the opposite, is that in Jeremiah 6:14, it says, they have healed also the hurt of the daughter of my people slightly, saying peace, peace, when there is no peace. And again, that's kind of interesting. That one always stuck with me, is that you ever see somebody flashing the peace sign, kind of look at what they are and where they may come from and how they may be acting when they're not flashing the peace sign. And is things really peaceful around them? If not, you know that they might be falling towards the ways of Cain.
Right. And there's kind of a modern, well, it's actually an old one too, but for that two-finger peace sign is, from what I've studied, that's also a way that the celebrities tell us, you know, they're always flashing all types of like Masonic type of signs. That's one of the ways that they tell us two genders. I don't know if you've heard of that one. Let me hold up the two fingers. Very interesting.
Yeah, Dale in the chat that said it says the fifth age. Churchill got it from Crowley, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I figured there was something deeper about that peace sign when you think about it. And again, he may be right. Flashing the signs. It's almost like when they do the Masonic, that shake, the handshake. You know.
Yes. Or it could be even like the two pillars. I think that's another interpretation as far as Masonic signs. There's so many. I mean, and that's talked about in the Bible too, that they wink with their eyes and they speak with their fingers. You know, that's something that's a characteristic of the corruption in the temple, I believe, is what I think Yeshua is describing that. If I'm,
oh wow, interesting.
Yeah, and it's in the New Testament. I have to look up that verse, but yeah, a lot of references toward that false sense of peace. And even during the tribulation, right, we're going to have the 3.5 years of what's supposed to be a peaceful time, and everyone will be relaxed, and then the world leader that is supposed to be the Antichrist will turn and make everything chaos after that.
You called it. And then I think in 2 Thessalonians, I think they talked about when they all cry out for peace and safety, sudden destruction cometh upon them.
Right.
And that verse always sits with me too. It's like, okay, where's all we hear about now in the last 30, 40, whatever years is safety, you know, safety first, all that. I mean, when I was a little child, I never got bombarded so much about safety things as I do now, you know?
Yeah. It's
crazy.
Really, exactly.
Okay, so again, when all these things, they just seem to happen, okay, and results because following the ways of Cain, kind of like, and I hate Proverbs 26:11 has this, like a dog that returns to his vomit is a fool who repeats his folly. And that always sets me too as an interesting verse, because again, you start to see the pattern. You act certain ways, and it happens. And people, again, they're almost so many people, I just don't even think that they think according to what society says around them, they're doing right. But actually, Jesus said this in Matthew 24:37. He says, for in the days before the flood, and he's talking about before the flood, obviously, people were eating and drinking, and he's comparing that to today. People were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage until the day Noah entered the ark, and they knew nothing about what would happen until the flood came and took them all away. So it's interesting because they back then were in a state of like domestic bliss. Same thing.
Yes.
They didn't really, they were having so much fun doing whatever they did, they didn't care.
Yep, exactly. They were eating, drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, and then all of a sudden the destruction came.
Suddenly, kind of like today.
Yeah, yeah, so true.
Now, you guys got stuff to talk, or you want me to?
Oh, please keep going, Brett. Please
Sure.
continue.
Okay. The next thing I want to get into, and we'll probably have to take it on to the next month because it does take a little while, but it is fascinating in my opinion, because I know Lisa and Noble, you were a little bit on the fence about Abel and whether he was a seed of the serpent or whether he was just Adam's seed, and I know it can go either way, but like I said, I believe that just because common sense and the way I found a couple sources that he was another seed of the serpent. Okay. But
Okay.
I believe, again, that's just me, and everybody can believe something different. It's fine. It doesn't matter. But I'm just saying there's reasons why, and more reasons why I believe this, and I'll explain here. I believe actually Abel was a very prominent figure in Jesus's mind and in the pagan religion, both, and not for the same reasons, obviously, but you'll see that Abel is mentioned in other parts of the Bible for something. And I believe that he was a key to the whole culture war here of the way of Cain. Reason being, it's simply, I think I mentioned it before, is because this is the things that the other side doesn't want you to know, is that you can be anybody, even a son of the serpent, and you can choose the way of God, and you could choose his way, and you could choose to follow him. Okay, that's what they don't want you to know, because it's so easy for someone to turn around and say, oh, I'm a victim of this because I have this, or I have that, or I was born with this, or I was from this group. No. I believe, again, that God gives us the choice. And I believe that that's the embarrassment of the post-fall world, is when Adam probably knew who he was or who the father was, but still he followed God, and he did a blood sacrifice. He was a shepherd. He was a very kind and good person. He had a good mindset. And Cain did not like it. So I bet that was even part of maybe the serpent's plan to say, you know what, take this Abel out of here because he's embarrassing us. Does that make sense?
No, that's a very interesting take. Thanks for sharing this, Brett, because this is something Noble and I had never even thought about until we started reading your books.
Oh, okay. Okay, yeah. I mean, again, it leaves responsibility for our own choices and leaves it on ourselves, okay, on the individual. A lot of people, again, especially nowadays, don't like to say that, okay, yeah, I could have made that decision better. I didn't, no, they like to say, oh, it's not my fault. Somebody else's fault, blaming everybody else around them, right? That's
Right.
a lot of that comes out because, again, but Abel chose the right way. Now, we got to remember there's some interesting parallels because we do have a few more minutes, so I'll hurry up and get some in here. Jesus, again, was called the last Adam. And I believe that the reason he was called, and part of it was obviously he wanted to rectify the sin that occurred in the garden with Adam. Okay. But again, we have the original shepherd Abel, and we have Jesus coming back as the good shepherd. Okay. And we haven't had some verses that we hear talking about. Actually, Jesus is talking about the martyr. He actually in Matthew 29, Matthew 23, 29 through 35, we have Jesus talking about to the Pharisees because they were in his way, and he basically rebuked them. He said, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, ye are the children of them which killed the prophets. fill you up with the measure of your fathers, ye serpents, ye generation of vipers, that upon you may come all the righteous blood shed upon the earth, from the blood of righteous Abel unto the blood of Zacharias, son of Barachias. Now again, he brings Abel into the picture, and he called them serpents, generations of vipers, of serpents. So obviously he was calling these individuals, at least partly, or at least, and also the way they were thinking, as sons of the serpent in a way, because whatever way, he's probably literally and figuratively. But notice that he inserts Abel into this conversation, because Abel again was taken out.
Right.
And again, we even find in Hebrews 12:24, it says, and to Jesus, the mediator of the new covenant, and to the blood of sprinkling that speaketh better things than that of Abel. So we get Abel, and I believe that, and I will get into it more next month when we get together, but Abel has such a significance. He has a significance, actually, when they formed the pagan religion, the serpent and Cain, way back in the post-flood fall world. They started incorporating Abel in there as Tammuz.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
you referenced that also. I remember reading that in your book.
Yeah, and he is actually a deity, a pagan deity back then, that was to be lamented for. You cry for him. And the reason, I believe, again, that actually that crying was instigated and started way back then is because Eve was so despondent. Of course, they made Eve a god in paganism, but she was so despondent that Abel was killed that she was crying almost nonstop for a while. So that is part of the tradition of weeping for Tammuz. And we'll get into this more a lot, because Abel did get incorporated into this pagan religion so much that instead of Cain had to find a way to twist everything around to the opposite, that now Abel maybe really needed to be sacrificed for the good of humanity, not because of a jealous brother. See what I'm saying?
Yes.
So
yes,
now
exactly.
he becomes a god that needed to be sacrificed. It's almost like an unholy parody of Jesus' sacrifice, because they already tried to twist it around way back at the beginning of the post-fall world.
Right. Well, it's interesting, these obscure little verses like the one in Hebrews, and you weeded them all out of the Bible. Like it's amazing to see how many times Abel is referenced, and without this background understanding of why he's being referenced, I used to just kind of gloss over those verses because I didn't have any background on there. So thank you.
Yeah. There's much more to it we can talk about next time as far as Abel, but yeah, I believe that Abel is a key figure in a lot, because it's more of rectifying a wrong that happened back then, as far as Jesus' sacrifice was actually what they did to him, and his whole decision to follow God. And I think I mentioned this last time already, but I'll mention it again because it's very significant. I believe that two of the key figures in the Bible, as far as the other side and understanding the other side, is Abel and Esau. Because here you got Abel being a son of the serpent even, and actually choosing to follow God. He had all the negative elements of his bloodline or whatever, his genetics, but he chose to do the right thing. But then you also have Esau, who had everything in the world going for him. He was the son of Isaac and the brother of Israel himself. He had all the genetics and all these things going. And what did he went the opposite way?
Right.
So those two examples, like I say, because I get a lot of Esau in that book you'll be reading, Lisa. He's in there quite a bit. I think you'll see.
Okay.
But he's very important too to understand, because again, it tells us one more thing, is that you could even have the best of everything, and even best life, best genes, best everything, but you could also choose to go the opposite way.
Right. We still have free will, regardless of
Right.
what family you're born into, or what your history is, what your DNA is, what your genetics are. We all have free will. So I think it's super important that you have those examples for us to look at and to follow in scripture, just to see what happened to those who chose poorly as opposed to those who chose wisely to serve the Most High.
Mm-hmm. Right, and it is a choice. If you guys, Noble, did you have some? You're kind of a little quiet here. You got some comments?
Oh, I'm just thinking. I'm wondering.
We're listening to you, Brett. It's a lot of deep information you're
I
bringing
don't
out
want
here.
to, but I don't want to be speaking only. I don't want it to be,
No.
I want you guys to get.
No, it's your book, buddy. You got to
Yeah.
be speaking more.
No, this is great information. And we have a few minutes left. I think we have 2 minutes until the music starts coming on. Did you want to wrap it up here, Brett, and give out your contact information again? And then I'll say a quick prayer to close us whenever you're ready.
Okay. Yeah, again, mysterybabylon.com is the website, and it will be a little bit more updated here once I get this latest version out. Next month, again, hopefully, God willing, we'll begin into the third book, the third volume, and I'm so excited about that. I hope you guys like it. Lisa Noble, I sent you a copy. I hope you like it.
Oh, definitely. I love it so far.
Oh, really? Oh, wait till you get into the second part, the white horse. I think you'll really get into it. But it's very right, straight for the throat type of book. I have to be that way because I believe in some perilous times and we need some understanding, and that's why I got it. So the email again is, thank you, Sherry. It's mysterybabylon@1791.com. If you want to email me any questions, please don't hesitate. I don't mind. I really enjoy bouncing off thoughts back and forth. And again, I'm excited about, like I said, we'll finish this all up here with Abel and anything else that for the end of the first book. And we could also start in with the new one next time. And I'm very excited about it. I think you guys will really find it thought compelling. I'm hoping, because it took me a long time. It was very hard to write because it's hard when you get to these certain topics to actually make sense of it and make people understand, or hopefully have them understand what you're trying to mean rather than what they could try to say that you mean. It's two different things.
No, true, but I see it in your writing that you explain things and you repeat things so that if people didn't get it the first time, they'll probably get it in the chapter or so to come, and you keep tying in everything. I think it's so awesome, Brett. I'm going to close this prayer real quick and then we're going to end. Thank you, everyone in chat. Thank you to Tammy and Sherry for moderating for us today. We just, dear Abba, we thank you so much for everyone here that's been fellowshipping with us, and for Brett that he's finished his new book and he's bringing out all this awesome information. Ask that you continue to heal Zen, Father God, and be with Justin and Joy as they're caring for their father. We ask all this in Yeshua's name. Amen. Bye, everyone.
Amen.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye,
Thank you for coming. See you next month.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us for this video and this broadcast. We appreciate all of you and thank you for your patronage. Please do like and subscribe and share with your friends. God bless all of you in your seeking.
As a bookstore for truth seekers, it's our goal to make ancient manuscripts which were once held captive by secretive institutions available for public consideration. In our generation, where wisdom has increased as Daniel the prophet foretold, we have access to many of the testimonies our early church brethren were persecuted for preserving. After being hidden for centuries, these manuscripts have been leaked from various sources throughout the earth, and it's our goal to gather these sources into printable form to make available for all who seek the ancient way. If you're looking to deepen your studies of the biblical narrative, find these ancient manuscripts and more at sacredwordpublishing.com. Your partnership with Sacred Word Publishing goes further than the publishing of ancient manuscripts and weekly video content.
You also make a huge impact across the earth in orphanages in Myanmar, India, Uganda, and Kenya.
Your support is crucial for the development of the ecclesia of real truth seekers.
We thank you for joining us in hosting Secrets Revealed, Momentary Zen, the Digital Readers Club, Ask Me Anything series, and other shows that have helped lead so many to the truth of salvation.
To become even more involved, please visit patreon.com/sacredwordpublishing, where you can partake in exclusive, interactive, patron-only content and help us continue shining the light of love in this darkened world.